I was drugged and raped when I was 17 years old, and I'm going to tell you the story of how I came to forgive the person that did that to me 10 years later through a meditation. I don't know how this is going to go, to be honest. I've never tried to record myself and say this story. It's probably going to be a bit of a long one, but just for context, this was the most extreme thing that had happened to me, but I, by this point, had already encountered several incidents of sexual assault, so I was pretty traumatized, unfortunately, by the age of 17. And I had adopted this belief that these incidents meant that there was something wrong with me. So when this happened to me, I remember so clearly waking up the next day and realizing that, like, physically I was okay, but I just so desperately did not want it to be the truth. So I tried to make an oath to myself that it was a one-night stand. I vowed that I didn't want to tell anyone, I didn't want to talk about it, and I tried as hard as I possibly could over the next 10 years to keep it hidden. Now, some of my close friends came to understand what happened to me. My partner at the time also understood what happened to me, but I was largely avoidant over talking about any of this stuff. I just did not want to have it out there, at all. And anyone that's experienced something traumatic and tried to deny it to themselves probably knows that it's one thing saying it, but it's another thing actually living it. And it completely haunted me for that decade. I had adopted many different vices to try to basically numb myself to just exist. I was living like this for 10 years, and my life was like this. And when I was 26, things started to unravel. I left the relationship that I had been in for almost a decade, and everything was pushing me to start to look at the things that had happened to me. And eventually I moved back to Sweden, to my mum's, stopped drinking, stopped doing all these things, and I had a spiritual awakening. And I began to start to go through the very, very deep closet of things that I had been avoiding my whole adult life, with one of them being this incident. Now, after a year and a half, I would say, of doing this, I was at a much better place with myself. I had accepted that this was what had happened to me, and I hadn't even told my mum, look, during this. So I had come to a point of telling my mum, telling my close friends, and I decided that I was going to go to Thailand, and I just had a very big feeling that I wanted to do a Vipassana retreat. Literally the first day I landed in Thailand, I went to the monastery, and I had been meditating a bit over the last year and a half, but really I hadn't meditated under a teacher. I hadn't really been following any technique, but I had seen it really, really shift things for me, really be a tool for me to start to see the truth of what my life was, instead of running away from everything that had happened to me, which I had done basically my whole 20s. So I get to the monastery, I'm doing this Vipassana retreat, day 4, day 5, it's getting pretty hard. I'm not really having any, I would say, groundbreaking experiences, but the whole experience itself feels like this mushroom trip, and I'm just grateful to be there and very, very determined to make it through the end. So about day 6, day 7, we learn this technique called Metta Bhavana, which is also known as loving kindness meditation. And the technique involves you essentially visualizing yourself or another person saying a chant and sending love from your heart space to this person to encourage you to be able to extend your love to people, not just that are your friends or people that you love in your life, but people that you're neutral towards, someone that you're walking past in the street, and then also people that you have a known difficulty towards, right? So we learned this technique on day 6 or 7, and I think it was the second last day of the retreat. where we would meditate in like periods of like 2 to 3 hours, and some of those periods we would get directed to practice one specific technique, but we had a period where we could pick what technique, and I was like, I'm doing Merbhavana, and I was like, I'm literally gonna go through every single person and their mum to see what happens, you know, to try to push myself again and again. So I did that. I did everyone I could think of, and then it came into my head to do this guy that had done this to me when I was 17. And it was a bit, I don't know, to be honest, even though I had been working through accepting what had happened to me, had not put too much thought on him at all. I had not put too much thought on him. And there was some resistance when it initially came up, which was like, okay, I've got to sit here and try my hardest to like just sit with the visualization of him. So I sit in meditation, and by this point I had been meditating for like 2 hours, you know, so I was really, really deep in meditation. And as I start to send my love towards him, something I've never experienced again after this happened, where I felt this whole wave of love shower over me, shower over him, and I saw the truth that me and this person, the perpetrator in this situation, were cut from the same cloth. And the only things that put us in this situation of being perpetrator and victims were just constructs of illusion, you know? And it wasn't that I was just being shown this vision, but it was me feeling, me understanding on a deep, deep level that me and this person were the same, have always been the same. And it's so weird because, you know what, I don't know how long I was sitting in meditation, but it was the overpouring of love as well as the understanding of how much like separation it takes to be put in that situation. It's like a sense of like mourning for that illusion, you know. And I just was crying. I was like sitting there crying completely because it was just showing me, you know, the truth of everything. And simultaneously to that, I was also being shown in the same way that this illusion was putting me and this perpetrator in this situation. I was also confining myself to that illusion. Even though I was on this healing journey, I was still living in a way that was holding shame for the things that had happened to me. And I was being shown all these different situations where I still acted in the way of that constriction of what I believed being meant for me, right? So simultaneously as seeing this love and seeing my perpetrator as this, I also got to see the true essence of who I was, you know, and see all the ways that I believed that I wasn't, right? And I was just there crying. Even, it's really hard to speak about, and I really hope that like I'm verbalizing it okay, that you understand, because I don't think that these experiences can be properly explained, you know. It's something that has to be experienced, but I'm gonna try. So I had this whole thing where I was just seeing, you know, this whole line of illusion. It was like almost like a domino effect, you know, of everything that was separating me, separating him, separating us all from the truth of existence. And I came out of that meditation and it was like I could not stop thinking about it. I mean, I was just like, it was something else. And the next day, so I think it was the day, the second last day of the retreat, the next day, when we were breaking our silence, we sat in a circle around, and I remember because I was the last person in the circle, right? And the first thing that we were going to do to break our silence was to basically summarize our experience from that 10 days. And immediately I knew I got to talk about this meditation, but that simultaneously meant me basically telling a room full of strangers that did not know me at all, because even though we'd been together for 10 days, we hadn't spoken, you know. The first thing about me was that I was a victim of sexual assault, and that was like, I was like, I don't know if I can do that. But simultaneously, I kept on coming back to that experience to understand that, like, you know, the person that believes that they are the illusion can't do that. But the person that understands and sees what I saw yesterday will be able to say this to this room and know that this doesn't have any reflection on them, right? And I remember it was like 30 people, and I was literally like shaking so much because I was like, I can't do it. And I said what I said, you know. Everyone was super, you know, open and supportive in that group. And being able to say that, to be honest, was healing in itself. I came out of the retreat, and then I reflected back on that experience because I could not stop thinking about it. I started to realize that, you know, if I never went through the thing that I went through, I would have never been led to be able to experience that. And I felt that that meditation, and I mean it was so life-changing that it changed my whole perspective on life. It changed how I navigated myself in life. And in a roundabout way, you know, I felt no malice, I felt no anger towards the perpetrator, the guy that did this for me, and almost felt, I do feel gratitude for the experience. I wouldn't wish this experience on my worst enemy. And I guess the message with this and this video is just, you know, I believe that this was the worst thing that had ever happened to me. I believed that I was like cursed. I believed that there was something so wrong for me. And then having this experience really shifted and made me see that, you know, not every lesson comes from reading a book. And sometimes, like, you learn very beautiful lessons through very painful experiences. And it made me so grateful for life. And I had, like I said, I could forgive everything that perpetrator had done, because I saw it as not an act that was personal, but an act that had to be taught. Yeah, so that is that story. I hope that if you watched it, thank you for listening to my story, and I hope that it was clear enough. Like I said, I'm not so used to speaking about it, so I don't know how it came across. And yeah, if you have gone through something similar, I just want to say that it is not you, okay? It's not you. There's nothing wrong with you. And if you ever need any support or just someone to message, then know my inbox is open. But yeah, okay.